Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. Until today, I guess I really hadn't thought about it, but I kind of feel sorry for the generation of young people growing up today. You see, I remember so vividly when I was a child or a youth when something would come in the mail with my name on it. There was such an excitement over the unexpected and surprising joy. Even more, if I was expecting something, there was that eager anticipation of wondering if it would come today. However, I sense with all the instant communication and easier ways of sending messages than through the mail that the youth of today don't know much about that kind of excitement and anticipation. All this makes me wonder about the churches Paul wrote to. Most of the books of the Bible we have from Paul are letters he wrote back to churches he had founded, and frankly, if those churches were excited to get a letter from him, it was only before they read it. In most of those letters, Paul fusses at those he left behind. You see, he had founded the church, gone off to found other churches, and then word had reached him about how one church or another had veered away from the fundamentals of faith he had preached and taught them. The letters we have were his attempt to set them straight again, and they can be harsh at times. But that's not so with his letter to the Philippians, and it's so refreshing to read a letter from Paul that is happy and encouraging. That's just what Philippians is. And not only that, but there are nuggets of faith and encouragement in his letter that speak to us in powerful ways. So this week, we want to look at what I'm calling Philippians' greatest hits. So let's just dive right in with Philippians chapter 1, verses 3 through 5. Just after he greets them, Paul opens with, I thank my God every time I remember you, constantly praying with joy in every one of my prayers for all of you, because of your sharing in the gospel from the first day until now. Maybe one of the first things to note here is that Paul says that he constantly prays for the church in Philippi and also for the individuals that make up the congregation. My guess is that many of us haven't considered the amount of time that pastors spend praying for their congregations. I remember an old story of two pastors' wives who were mending their husband's pants. One said, my husband's church isn't going so well. He complains all the time about it. The other said, my husband speaks so well of the congregation. The first wife was mending the seat, the second, the knees. Please know you are prayed for. Perhaps praying for your church and your pastor would be nice for you to do as well. It's important, and as important as that is, there's another phrase in that passage that stands out to me. Sharing in the gospel. Indeed, that seems to me to be the best part of being the church together. We share in the gospel. We share in the joy and good news of our salvation. We share in the love and unfathomable grace of God for us. We share in being brothers and sisters in God's family, caring for and being cared for alike. There are so many, many gifts of sharing in the gospel. We also share the responsibility to live in love and to tell others about the good news. The gospel isn't something we just receive. It's also something we give away. There's a similar passage a bit later in chapter 1 that I want to lift up to you as well. In verse 27 of chapter 1, Paul writes, only live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel. I like that part about standing side by side with one mind for the faith of the gospel. That sounds a lot like what we've already talked about. But there's another phrase there that we need to think about too. Paul encouraged them to live their lives in a manner worthy of the gospel. You see, the gospel isn't just about the grace we receive. It's also about how we live in response to that grace. It's how we live in love, compassion, kindness, and grace for others. That's a life worthy of the gospel. What would our world look like if we did this? In what ways would we be invited to change in order to live worthily of the gospel? Now please remember, Paul isn't fussing here. He's encouraging them in faith. Just so, he encourages us. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.